The mysterious signal, the unexpected signal. The calm of the galaxy was shattered by a sudden, unexpected event. In the vast silence of space, a signal appeared. It wasn't just any signal. It was an ancient, mysterious message that no one could understand at first. The Galactic Command Center, a hub of all military and communication operations, immediately went on high alert. For years, the galaxy had enjoyed an uneasy peace. The great empires of the stars, once bitter enemies, had finally settled into a fragile alliance. The technology of countless civilizations had brought progress, but it had also kept them safe from the dark unknowns of space. But no one had expected this. The signal, faint and crackling with static, was unlike anything the command had ever encountered. It seemed to come from the far reaches of the galaxy, an area known to be empty, devoid of life, and unexplored by most space-faring races. It was so old that even the advanced technology of the galaxy's finest engineers could barely decode its origin. Yet there was one thing that everyone could agree on. It was definitely human. An officer in the communications room, Lieutenant Riley, stared at the screen in disbelief. "It's from the human fleet. But that fleet was thought to be lost centuries ago." Her words echoed in the silence, her voice heavy with confusion. The ancient fleet had disappeared long before the Galactic Command was even established. Some believed they had been destroyed in a great battle. Others speculated they had simply vanished into the unknown. No one knew for sure. "Bring up the coordinates," ordered Captain Arctis, his voice calm but filled with urgency. As the lieutenant entered the command, the coordinates appeared on the large display. They pointed toward a forgotten sector of space, one far beyond the borders of the established galactic map, a place where even the most advanced ships rarely ventured. The entire command center fell silent. The implications were enormous. If this signal was truly human, it meant the lost fleet was still out there, and they had returned. But what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? Why had they come back now, after all these centuries? And why this strange, encrypted message? As the officers scrambled to analyze the signal, another realization struck. The power readings from the signal were unlike anything they had ever seen. It wasn't just a distress call or a casual communication. This signal was intentional, and it was meant to be heard. The humans had sent it on purpose. Could it be a trap? Lieutenant Riley asked, her voice tinged with concern. Captain Arctis turned to her with a steady gaze. "It's too early to say, but we have to prepare for every possibility." The decision was made. The Galactic Council, a group of the most influential leaders from all the major empires, would convene immediately. The galaxy's future was at stake, and the Council had to decide how to respond to this unexpected arrival. Hours later, the Council chamber buzzed with tension. Representatives from each empire filled the room, and the air was thick with unease. The signal had been played for them, and the members were all trying to comprehend the implications. Human technology was once considered primitive, said Senator Zora, a representative of the Sharian Empire. Now we must ask ourselves if they've advanced beyond us in secret, hiding their power all these years. "It's not just about technology," said Chancellor Talon of the Vornax Dominion. "We need to know why they've come back. Are they allies or enemies? If they've been out there all this time, they may have uncovered threats we don't even know exist." The debate raged on, but one thing was clear. The signal was not something to be ignored. The galaxy's most powerful minds had already begun working on deciphering its true meaning, but they could not ignore the growing sense of dread in the pit of their stomachs. Meanwhile, aboard the ships in deep space, a group of elite soldiers trained for the most difficult missions gathered for a briefing. Commander Harless, a grizzled veteran of countless space battles, stood before them, his voice low and intense. "Listen up," he began. "We've been called for a reason. The signal we've detected could be the most important message in the galaxy's history. We need to be prepared for anything, and I mean anything. Whatever is coming, we'll face it head on. Our mission is simple: find out who sent this signal and what they want. Do not let your guard down for a second." The soldiers nodded, their faces hard with determination. They knew the weight of the task before them. This was no ordinary mission. It was the start of something far bigger, something they couldn't yet understand. They were going to face a force they knew nothing about, and the outcome could change everything. Back at the Galactic Command Center, the screen flickered, and a new message appeared. It was a simple transmission, but it made every officer's heart skip a beat. It was a warning. "The time has come. Prepare yourselves. The warship is on its way. Humanity returns." The room fell silent once more. It was the final confirmation. The humans had returned, and they were not coming to ask for help. They were coming to take action. Whatever this meant, the galaxy would soon find out. But one thing was certain: the future was about to change forever. The fleet's arrival. The tense silence that followed the warning from the mysterious message was broken only by the steady hum of machinery. Officers worked furiously at their stations, pulling up every scrap of data they could find on the ancient human fleet. The galaxy was on the edge of its seat. If the humans had returned, what did that mean for everyone else? The peaceful alliance between the star systems was built on the assumption that humanity had been lost, extinct even. But now, that certainty had been shattered. The signal had been detected several light years away, but its strength was growing rapidly, indicating that the warship was nearing the galactic border. Lieutenant Riley, still in the communications room, turned to Captain Arctis. "It's moving fast, Captain," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "And it's enormous, far bigger than anything we've seen before." Captain Arctis looked at the display, his brow furrowing. "That's not just a ship. It's a warship, and it's designed for something far more than exploration. Prepare the fleet. We need to intercept it before it reaches the core worlds." The warning was clear. Whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be a peaceful return. The fleet had been gathering in the outer regions for months, and now it was time for them to take action. The Alliance needed to know what kind of force they were dealing with. Was this fleet an ally, or had humanity returned as conquerors? In a far corner of the galaxy, the enormous human warship approached, its gleaming hull reflecting the distant light of the stars. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. With dark, angular lines and heavily fortified plating, the ship looked as if it had been designed for a single purpose: war. The commanders aboard the ship were preparing for their first confrontation in centuries. They had long ago perfected their tactics, and their weapons were as advanced as the galaxy had ever seen. Aboard the warship, Commander Harless stood in front of his crew, his face grim but resolute. "The time has come," he said, addressing his officers. "We've been in the shadows long enough. Our mission was clear: protect humanity. And now, it's time for the galaxy to know we never left." A murmur of approval rippled through the crew. They knew the stakes were high, but they were ready. Humanity had survived out there in the unknown, surviving against impossible odds. They were stronger than anyone could have imagined, and the galaxy would soon learn that they had been underestimated. Back at the Galactic Command Center, the fleet was preparing for what was to come. The decision had been made. The Alliance was not going to wait to see whether the humans were peaceful. They would confront the warship at the border of the galaxy, where it would be stopped before it could advance any further. "We'll make contact with the human fleet," Captain Arctis ordered. "Prepare the intercept course, but be ready for anything. These are humans, but they've been lost for so long. We don't know who they've become." The fleet's ships, each one armed and ready, moved into formation. Their mission was clear: stop the human warship from advancing further. They didn't know if the humans would be friendly or hostile, but they couldn't risk their return being the signal of war. As the massive warship moved closer, a small fleet of Alliance ships moved to intercept. The first contact would be made soon, and the entire galaxy was holding its breath. The sensors aboard the human warship were silent for a moment. Then, without warning, the ship's captain, Commander Harless, issued the order. A single, low-frequency pulse was sent out into space, a signal that was meant to be received by the Alliance. It was simple, almost too simple. Prepare yourselves. Humanity is coming home. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance. Would the Alliance and humanity unite, or would they find themselves in the middle of a devastating war? As the human fleet neared the galaxy's border, no one could predict what was to come. The time for peace was over. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would be forever changed. And as the human warship loomed closer to the heart of the Alliance, everyone knew that the confrontation was inevitable. But no one, least of all the Alliance, was ready for what humanity's return would truly mean. The first contact. The tension was palpable across the galaxy. The Alliance had gathered its forces, prepared for what could be the most important confrontation in their history. As the human warship neared, every sensor, every communication device was on high alert. It was a moment no one in the galaxy had expected, and yet here it was, the mysterious return of humanity's lost fleet. Aboard the warship, Commander Harless stood at the front of the command deck, staring at the vast expanse of space ahead. His eyes narrowed as the distant stars slowly moved into focus, revealing the approaching Alliance fleet. It was a powerful sight. Several ships, armed and ready, moved in formation, preparing for the moment they would make contact. "Prepare for communication," Harless ordered, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "Let's make our intentions clear." The crew of the warship worked quickly, sending out a clear, encrypted signal toward the approaching fleet. The message was simple, but it carried a weight that could not be ignored. "We come not as invaders, but as humanity's last hope. Stand down and listen, or face the consequences." A moment of silence passed as the message was received. The Alliance ships, stunned by the gravity of the words, hesitated. No one could believe it. Humanity had returned, not with an olive branch, but with a clear warning. In the command center of the Alliance, Captain Arctis and his officers exchanged wary glances. The message had been received, and there was no going back. Humanity's return had taken on a new form, an unknown power with the potential to reshape the balance of the galaxy. What did they mean by the last hope? What consequences were they threatening? It's clear they don't want to fight, but they're not asking for peace either, Lieutenant Riley observed, watching the data on the screen. "They're giving us an ultimatum." Captain Arctis clenched his fists. "Prepare for a response. I want everything ready in case this turns hostile. We have no idea what they've been doing out there for so long, but we need to be ready for anything." The entire room shifted into high gear. Ships were moved into strategic positions. Tactical analysis and simulations ran across every display. In the heart of the galaxy's military might, officers made decisions that could affect the future of all known life. A few hours later, the Alliance fleet approached the human warship. The moment had arrived for the first real contact. Aboard the human ship, Commander Harless watched with a steady gaze, knowing that the galaxy would soon know who they were, what they had become, and why they had returned. On the other side, Captain Arctis stood in front of a holographic display, his mind racing. He had trained for this. He had studied first contact protocols for years. But nothing could prepare him for this moment, when humanity's long-lost fleet would face the galaxy's greatest military minds. "Open a channel," Arctis ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly, the face of Commander Harless appeared in front of him. His expression was one of hardened determination, but there was no hostility in his voice. Yet, "This is Commander Harless of the Terran warship, Eclipse. You've received our message," he said. "I suggest we skip the formalities. Time is not on our side." Captain Arctis held his breath for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The humans had always been known for their resourcefulness, but the force before him was something else entirely. This warship was not part of the ancient fleets. They had evolved, become something new. "We were not prepared for this, Commander Harless," Arctis began slowly, his voice steady despite the situation. "You've been gone for centuries. We thought you were lost. But now you return with a warship demanding our attention. What is it that you want? What do you mean by humanity's last hope? Commander Harless' face softened slightly. He could see the uncertainty in the captain's eyes. It wasn't fear. It was the question every leader in the galaxy would ask. What had happened to humanity? And why had they been gone for so long? Our purpose is simple, Harless replied. The galaxy is facing a new threat, one that you and your allies are not prepared to fight. We've been monitoring these forces for decades, but we couldn't reveal ourselves until we were certain. The time has come for you to decide. Join us, or face the destruction of everything you've built. His words were heavy with the knowledge of something no one else could possibly understand. The galaxy had been too focused on their petty conflicts to see the larger picture, too blind to notice the enemies lurking in the shadows. Captain Arctis didn't know how to respond. His entire worldview was shaking. Humanity had been lost, yet here they were, returning not as saviors, but as something far more dangerous. It was clear that they had prepared for war, not peace. And now, the galaxy had no choice but to listen. The silence on both ends was thick, as both sides weighed their next move. Finally, Arctis spoke, his voice filled with resolve. We need more information, Commander. If you are telling the truth, then we need to act fast. But we cannot risk everything on a promise. We need proof. Commander Harless nodded. I'll give you proof, but you need to make your choice, and you need to make it quickly. The enemy is coming. And with that, the communication ended. The fleet held its position, uncertain of what to do next. But one thing was certain, the return of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first contact continued. The communication channel closed, leaving an eerie silence across the command center. Captain Arctis stood still for a long moment, staring at the now blank screen. He had been prepared for many things, but never this. Humanity, gone for centuries, had returned, not with a friendly message or a call for peace, but with an ultimatum. Join them, or face destruction. The words echoed in his mind, growing heavier with every passing second. The Alliance's officers were tense, their eyes glued to their stations. They knew the stakes, but they didn't fully understand the implications. Humanity's fleet was a ghost from the past, and now it was a force to be reckoned with. Arctis knew they couldn't afford to make the wrong decision. Captain, I recommend we send a reconnaissance team, Lieutenant Riley suggested, her voice low but urgent. We need to understand their capabilities. If we're going to stand against them, we must know what we're dealing with. Arctis turned to her. He knew she was right. The human warship, the Eclipse, had made it clear they had weapons and technology the galaxy had never seen before. If they were really facing an enemy that could decimate everything, they had to act fast. Get the team ready. We'll send them in covertly. But make no mistake, we're still in negotiation mode. We can't afford to provoke them until we know more. A small group of elite soldiers was selected from the Alliance's ranks, and they boarded a stealth vessel that would attempt to get closer to the human warship. The mission was clear: gather intelligence. What weapons did the humans possess? How many ships were in their fleet? Could they be reasoned with, or was a fight inevitable? Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse, Commander Harless stood on the bridge, his mind working like clockwork. He had expected the response. The galaxy was full of distrust, and now he had to prove that humanity was not the enemy. But the task was daunting. His warship was the only one of its kind, an ancient relic, modified and upgraded with technology humanity had salvaged and perfected over centuries. And there were things even he didn't know about the new threats looming in the galaxy. Status report, Harless ordered, his voice cool and commanding. One of his officers, Lieutenant Tessa, turned to face him. The Alliance fleet is holding their position, Captain. They've sent a reconnaissance team, but they're still too far out to intercept. They're cautious as expected. Harless nodded, his eyes scanning the stars outside. We've been out here for so long, fighting battles no one else could see. Now they want to know what we're capable of. He paused, thinking for a moment. Prepare to send a message to the fleet. Let them know that we'll give them the proof they need. But they need to move quickly. If we don't act now, it may be too late. The communications officer nodded and began preparing the transmission. A few minutes later, the Alliance fleet received a new message, this one more direct than before. We've waited long enough. The enemy is coming. They've already begun their approach. Prepare your forces. If you wait too long, it will be too late. The cryptic message sent a wave of uncertainty across the Alliance's ranks. Captain Arctis read the message and looked at his officers. The warning was chilling. It was clear that the human fleet was not bluffing. There was something out there, something coming that no one was prepared for. We don't have time to waste, Arctis said, his voice hardening with resolve. We're going to need more than just reconnaissance. We need to act, and we need to act now. Send a reply. Tell them we're ready to meet their terms, but they have to show us the proof. We can't risk everything on their word. Lieutenant Riley stepped forward, her face serious. Captain, we don't know if we can trust them, but we also don't know if we can afford not to trust them. Arctis sighed deeply, knowing she was right. If the humans were telling the truth, their return could be the galaxy's only hope. But if they were lying, the consequences would be catastrophic. The Alliance sent their response, agreeing to meet with the human fleet, but demanding full disclosure of the threat they faced. The meeting was set. Hours later, in the cold expanse of space, the human fleet and the Alliance ships came into close proximity. The atmosphere was tense, but the real danger had yet to reveal itself. The fate of the galaxy now hung in the balance. The meeting would take place on neutral ground, a barren planet far from the galactic core, where both sides could discuss terms without interference. Commander Harless stood before his crew one last time, his gaze intense. This meeting will decide everything. We need to show them the truth, no matter the cost. The unexpected threat. The barren planet stood silent beneath the vast expanse of space, far from the bustling heart of the galaxy. Here, the Alliance fleet and the human warship Eclipse were about to meet. The neutral ground was chosen to avoid any sudden moves or attacks, yet even in this moment of tentative peace, both sides were on edge. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Commander Harless stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, his fingers tapping against the armrest of his command chair. His mind raced with thoughts of the meeting ahead. He knew that the Alliance had no choice but to trust him, but trust could be a fragile thing. Captain, Lieutenant Tessa said, breaking his concentration, the Alliance ships are entering the atmosphere. They'll be here within the hour. Harless nodded, his expression unreadable. Good. We'll show them what we've discovered. But make no mistake, if they hesitate, we'll act. This galaxy is already too far gone to risk another delay. On the bridge of the Alliance flagship, Captain Arctis looked out at the darkened surface of the barren planet. His thoughts mirrored Harless. He had to be cautious, but he couldn't afford to be too cautious. If the humans were right, something dire was approaching. The galaxy's greatest minds had been trying to understand the intelligence gathered from the mysterious signals, but they had found little. Time was running out. Prepare the crew for the meeting, Captain Arctis ordered. Let's make this quick. We don't have the luxury of long discussions. We need answers. Moments later, a shuttle from the Eclipse descended toward the surface of the planet. It was sleek, silent, and deadly, much like the ship it came from. The doors of the shuttle opened to reveal Commander Harless and his top officers. Their faces were set, resolute, prepared for what was to come. They were here to give the Alliance a glimpse of the truth. The members of the Alliance delegation were already waiting on the planet's surface, each one fully armed and prepared for any eventuality. Captain Arctis stepped forward, his expression wary. Commander Harless, he greeted, his voice calm but carrying a sense of authority. You said you had proof. We're here to see it. Harless didn't waste time with pleasantries. He motioned for his officers to activate the display, which unfolded like a holographic map of the galaxy. The projection was massive, showing not only the Alliance's territory, but areas of space that had been untouched for generations. Several new regions were highlighted in bright red, with warnings flashing across the display. The Alliance officers stared at the map, confused and uneasy. "Those are the zones we've been tracking for the last few decades," Harless said, "and they're all within striking distance of the galaxy's core. The enemy, they're unlike anything you've seen. We've been fighting them for years, and we barely survived. Their ships are massive, and their tactics are unlike anything the galaxy has ever faced." Lieutenant Tessa stepped forward, pointing at the blinking red zones. "We've gathered data from reconnaissance missions. They've already started to move, and their forces are closer than you think. Within weeks, they'll be at the edge of your core worlds. This isn't a war we can win without help." The Alliance officers exchanged uneasy glances. They hadn't been prepared for this. They knew war was coming, but they hadn't expected it to come so quickly, so soon. "You've been tracking them for years, you say." The tension in the air was thick, as if every officer was grappling with the enormity of the situation. Could they trust these humans? Could they afford not to? Before anyone could respond, a sudden disturbance cut through the air, a sharp, piercing sound that came from the planet's atmosphere. Everyone froze, eyes scanning the sky above. Then, without warning, the ground trembled. The air itself seemed to pulse with energy. "They're here," Lieutenant Tessa whispered. The sky darkened. Massive ships, far larger than anything the Alliance had ever encountered, suddenly appeared above them. The ships weren't just warships. They were something more, a symbol of sheer destructive power. The Alliance fleet looked up in horror as the ships descended with terrifying speed. "Everyone, get to your stations," Captain Arctis shouted, his voice urgent. "This is not a drill." In that moment, the Alliance learned the terrifying truth. The enemy Harless had spoken of was already here. They hadn't waited for the humans to finish their negotiations. The fleet had arrived, and with it, the nightmare that humanity had been hiding from for centuries. The first wave of enemy ships began their attack, unleashing devastating firepower on the planet's surface. The ground shook, buildings crumbled, and chaos erupted in every direction. The Alliance forces were unprepared, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the onslaught. Commander Harless stood tall, his eyes hardening. "This is why we've returned. Humanity will fight, as we always have, and we will do it together." As the battle began, it became clear that the galaxy was not prepared for what was about to come. The human warship Eclipse and its crew were the only hope for the galaxy's survival, and they had no time to waste. The war had begun, and the fate of the galaxy would be decided by the next few hours. Secrets of the lost fleet. The dust from the first wave of enemy bombardment was still hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. The Alliance forces were struggling to regroup. Many had been caught off guard by the unexpected assault, and their lines were already beginning to falter. Captain Arctis and his officers fought to keep their ships in formation, but the enemy's firepower was overwhelming. On the surface of the planet, Commander Harless stood with his arms crossed, observing the chaos unfolding. His expression was grim, but there was no panic in his eyes. Humanity had faced destruction before. This was not new to him. He had lived through worse. But what was unfolding now, this sudden, merciless attack, had to be stopped. The first wave of enemy ships was only the beginning. More were coming, and with each passing minute, the galaxy's forces were being whittled down. The Alliance's fleet, once a proud symbol of unity, was losing ground quickly. "We need to turn the tide," Harless said, his voice low but filled with command. "Get me a direct line to Captain Arctis." Within moments, a communication channel was opened between the two commanders. Captain Arctis's face appeared on the screen, his expression strained. "Commander, we're losing ground," Arctis said, his voice filled with urgency. "We can't hold them off for long. How do we stop them?" Harless's gaze hardened. "You can't. Not without our help. But we have one advantage. They haven't attacked us yet. Their focus is on the Alliance, on your fleets. They don't know everything about us, and they won't until it's too late." "Then what do you suggest?" Arctis asked. "We need to show them who we are. We've been holding our cards close for a reason, but now we don't have that luxury. The Eclipse is equipped with advanced weaponry, enough to take down their largest ships. But it's not just about firepower. It's about strategy. You can't win this war with strength alone. We have a technology they don't understand, something far beyond their reach." The tension was palpable as Arctis processed Harless's words. The Alliance had always prided itself on its advanced technology, but it was clear now that they were outclassed. And if humanity's warship held the key to turning the tide, they had no choice but to trust them. "How much time do we have?" Arctis asked, his voice tight with stress. "Not long," Harless replied, his eyes narrowing. "We're ready, but the longer you wait, the more damage they'll do. Let us show you what we've learned. Humanity has secrets, secrets that were left behind, and secrets we've learned over the years. We have weapons, but we also have something else. Something more important." Captain Arctis's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What could be more important than weapons?" "Knowledge," Harless said, his voice becoming more intense. "When humanity was lost to the galaxy, we discovered things no one else could. Ancient technologies, buried for millennia. We were forced to adapt, to survive. But now, that knowledge is what will save you. You just need to trust us." There was a long silence as Arctis weighed his options. The planet was under constant attack, and it was clear that the Alliance's forces could not hold out much longer without help. But trusting the humans meant trusting their word, and he wasn't sure he was ready to do that. Finally, Arctis spoke, his voice steady, but with a hint of uncertainty. "All right, we'll give you one chance. Show us what you've got." Back on the Eclipse, Harless turned to his officers. "Prepare to activate the second phase. We're going to give them a demonstration. This battle isn't just about firepower. It's about knowledge. Humanity survived because we adapted, and now we're going to use that survival instinct to save the galaxy." The Eclipse shifted into position, and Harless watched as the first of the enemy ships began to break through the Alliance's defenses. He could feel the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just a battle for the galaxy. It was a battle for humanity's legacy. It was time to show the universe that they had been underestimated. The Eclipse fired a single, concentrated shot. The blast was unlike anything the enemy had ever seen. It ripped through one of the largest ships in the enemy fleet, disabling it in a single strike. The impact was so powerful that the surrounding ships momentarily faltered, giving the Alliance's remaining forces a much-needed break. But that wasn't the end of it. As the enemy's fleet tried to regroup, Harless activated another system, one that had been kept hidden for centuries. The Eclipse's shields flared to life in a stunning display of energy, creating an impenetrable barrier that blocked incoming enemy fire. The human warship was far more advanced than anyone had imagined, and it wasn't just its weapons that made it formidable. It was its ability to survive. In that moment, the Alliance forces saw the truth. Humanity's warship wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, survival, and the will to never give up. And as the enemy fleet recoiled in the face of this new power, the galaxy's fate began to change. The unexpected demonstration of humanity's power shifted the balance of the battle. With the Eclipse's weapons and shields, the Alliance forces suddenly had a fighting chance. But the enemy was far from defeated. There were more battles to come, and the galaxy was not safe. Humanity's secrets had been revealed, but the true nature of the threat was still unknown. The war was far from over. The battle for the future. The tide of the battle had shifted. The once certain destruction of the Alliance's fleet now seemed possible to reverse. Humanity's warship, the Eclipse, had proven its power, but the victory was far from assured. The enemy had been caught off guard by the humans' sudden display of strength, but that moment of surprise wouldn't last forever. They would adapt, regroup, and return with greater force. As the dust settled from the devastating strike against the enemy flagship, Captain Arctis looked up from his command chair, his expression grim but filled with determination. The Alliance fleet had regrouped, and they were now prepared for the counteroffensive. The eclipse had given them a lifeline, but it wasn't enough. They needed more. "Captain," Lieutenant Riley called out, her voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. "The enemy is retreating. They're not giving up, but they're falling back into formation. They'll likely be planning another assault. We can't let them reorganize." Arctis clenched his jaw. "We have one shot at this, and we need to act before they can recover. But we can't do it without the eclipse." Turning toward Commander Harless, who had been standing silently at the bridge, Arctis spoke. "Commander, you've given us a taste of what you can do. But now we need the full force of humanity's strength. Can you keep the pressure on them?" Harless nodded without hesitation, his eyes cold and calculating. "We'll keep the pressure, but I need you to follow my lead. This isn't a conventional war. We've faced these enemies before, and we know how to fight them." Arctis straightened in his chair. "What's your plan?" Harless stepped forward, his voice steady. "We've spent centuries adapting, learning, and surviving. Our fleet is small, but it's advanced. We've been hiding our true capabilities for far too long. Now it's time to reveal everything we've learned. We need to attack them where they least expect it, at their weak point. But it's not just about overwhelming firepower. We need to use strategy." Harless quickly detailed his plan, his officers joining in to assist with the calculations. The enemy had a weakness, an exposed signal array hidden deep in the core of their fleet, which, if targeted, could cripple their coordination and render their ships useless. The key was striking swiftly and decisively. They couldn't waste time. This needed to be a clean, surgical strike. "We can disrupt their communications, disorient them long enough for the Alliance fleet to push through," Harless continued. "But once we strike, we'll have only minutes before they adapt." The plan was risky, but it was their only hope. The Alliance fleet had no other choice. They would need to follow the Eclipse's lead, trusting humanity's strategy and technology. Arctis made the decision quickly. "Let's do it. Set course for the enemy's formation. We'll need to move fast." On the surface of the planet, the Alliance forces had begun digging in, preparing for the worst. But the arrival of the eclipse had given them new hope. The human warship was a symbol of survival, of a race that had faced near extinction, and had returned not only to survive but to conquer. The eclipse's engines roared to life, and its crew worked swiftly to implement the strategy. The human warship, leading the charge, broke from the formation of the Alliance fleet, drawing the enemy's attention. As the eclipse fired another devastating shot at an enemy flagship, the enemy fleet staggered, briefly losing their coordinated attack. At that exact moment, the Alliance forces followed suit, using the disruption to launch a full assault on the now vulnerable ships. The enemy, disoriented and scrambling to re-establish communications, struggled to mount an effective defense. "This is it," Arctis said, watching the chaos unfold through the holographic displays. "We're pushing through. Humanity's strength is the key to this victory." "All ships, prepare for the assault," Captain Arctis called out, his voice filled with determination. "We make this last strike together. No more holding back." The Eclipse fired first, its weapons unleashed in a blinding display of power. The first wave of enemy ships was decimated in seconds, their shields no match for the devastating energy pulse that tore through their hulls. But even as the enemy staggered, more ships surged forward, undeterred by the loss. "Incoming fire. Brace for impact," Lieutenant Tessa shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The enemy was relentless. Their ships closed in on the Eclipse, sending waves of laser fire that shook the warship to its core. Despite the onslaught, the Eclipse held its ground. The shields flickered, holding back the barrage of energy blasts. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly, their hands flying across the control panels, keeping the ship's systems online. Harless knew the enemy would keep coming, but they couldn't let up. The galaxy's future depended on this fight. "Activate the final weapon system," Harless ordered, his voice firm. "It's time we show them what we've been hiding." The command was executed, and the ship's core hummed with energy. A weapon, an experimental system developed over centuries, was activated. The Eclipse released a wave of pure, concentrated energy, unlike anything the enemy had seen. The beam cut through the heart of the enemy fleet, disabling ship after ship with a single strike. But the enemy wasn't done. Their remaining forces fought back with fury, desperate to hold onto their power. The battle escalated into a full-scale war of attrition, with both sides giving everything they had. The Alliance fleet, now in sync with the human warship, pushed forward with everything they had. Ships collided, and the battlefield was filled with the sound of detonations as the two sides exchanged blow after blow. For every enemy ship that fell, it seemed that two more took its place. As the battle raged on, Arctis realized that they were slowly gaining ground. The tide had shifted again. The Alliance had learned to fight like humanity, tenacious, resilient, and willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. "We're doing it," Lieutenant Ridley exclaimed as the enemy's formation began to falter. The Eclipse had turned the tide in their favor. The enemy fleet, now disorganized and weakened by the focused strikes from humanity's warship, was beginning to break apart. But even as victory seemed within reach, the enemy's flagship, massive and heavily fortified, emerged from the debris. It was their last hope, a vessel designed to be a symbol of their strength. The enemy fleet rallied around it, pushing back against the Alliance forces with renewed determination. "We need to end this now," Arctis shouted. "Target the flagship, all ships. This ends here." The final assault began. With everything the Alliance had, they charged forward. The Eclipse took the lead, its powerful weapons unleashing wave after wave of energy. The Alliance ships followed in formation, cutting through the enemy defenses like a hot knife through butter. The flagship's shields were powerful, but not invincible. With every strike, its defenses weakened. And then, with a final devastating shot from the Eclipse, the flagship exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The shockwave reverberated through space, and the remaining enemy forces scattered, defeated. The battlefield was silent for a moment. The remnants of the enemy fleet drifted lifelessly through space, the remnants of what had once been a mighty force now reduced to rubble. The Alliance fleet, battered but victorious, floated in the quiet aftermath. Captain Arctis, his face exhausted but triumphant, looked toward the human warship. "We did it," he said softly, his voice filled with awe. "Humanity saved us." Harless stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Humanity didn't save you. We saved the galaxy. Together." The Alliance fleet moved into formation around the Eclipse, now a symbol of the bond between humanity and the galaxy's other races. The battle had been hard-fought, but in the end, it was humanity's strength, ingenuity, and resolve that had turned the tide. As the dust settled, the future of the galaxy seemed brighter. The Alliance, strengthened by humanity's unexpected return, knew that their unity would be their greatest asset moving forward. The enemy had been defeated, but the true victory lay in the fact that they had learned to fight as one. Humanity, once thought lost, had proven its place in the galaxy. And with that, a new chapter in the galaxy's history began.